And our top focus in WION this hour. The Russian President Vladimir Putin hosted the Chinese leader Xi Jinping for 2 days. Both the leaders held formal talks yesterday, which the Kremlin described as a new era in the two countries' relationship. Listen in.
Тост за здоровье нашего друга, уважаемого председателя Китайской Народной Республики, господина Си Цзиньпиня.
我提议我们举杯为尊敬的中国主席习近平同志的身体健康，
За здоровье всех членов китайской делегации.
为中方所有的代表团成员身体健康，
За углубление российско-китайского всеобъемлющего партнерства и стратегического взаимодействия.
为深化俄中全面战略协作伙伴关系，
За процветание и благополучие народов России и КНР.
为了俄罗斯和中国人民繁荣昌盛。
Гэньбэй.
During the second day of the Chinese leaders' three-day visit to Moscow, the two leaders signed a series of documentation on a strategic cooperation and also called for a responsible dialogue to resolve the Ukraine crisis. Now, during the meet, the Chinese president said that Beijing has an impartial position on the conflict in Ukraine and further emphasized upon China's adherence to the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter.
"我想强调，在乌克兰危机问题上，中方一贯遵循联合国宪章宗旨和原则，秉持客观公正立场。"
Meanwhile, putting a united front in Moscow, the Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the 12-point peace plan by China could be utilized as the basis for the peaceful settlement of the Ukraine war, but only if Kiev and the West are ready, further asserting on how he sees no such readiness. Putin further accused the West of rejecting Beijing's proposal to end the Ukraine conflict.
Безусловно, мы не обошли вниманием ситуацию вокруг Украины. Полагаем, что многие из положений, выдвинутого Китаем мирного плана, созвучны российским подходам и могут быть взяты за основу для мирного урегулирования, когда к нему будут готовы на Западе и в Киеве.
The United States has, however, dismissed the Chinese peace plan proposal and has said that a ceasefire now would lock in Russian territorial gains and give Putin's army more time to regroup. Kiev, meanwhile, has welcomed China's diplomatic involvement but has insisted that Russia must pull its troops out of Ukraine. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev during a rare and unannounced visit by the Japanese leader. The visit underscores Tokyo's support for Ukraine in its fight against Russia's invasion. The trip was kept secret until the last minute for security reasons. The Japanese Prime Minister had been the only leader of the group of 7 nations to visit Ukraine. Kiev has seen an outpouring of popular support in Japan following the Russian invasion.
唯一の戦争被爆国である我が国としてロシアの核兵器による威嚇は受け入れられず、ましてやロシアが77年間にわたる核兵器不使用の記録を破るようなことはあってはなりません。
Zelensky praised the Japanese Prime Minister, calling Kishida a powerful defender of the international order and a long-time friend of Ukraine. Earlier, Kishida also toured Ukrainian town of Bucha, where the mayor has said that more than 400 civilians were killed last year. Russia is accused of widespread war crimes, which it denies. The Japanese Prime Minister also laid a wreath outside a church before observing a moment of silence. Now, Kishida's Ukraine visit coincided with the Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to Russia. In what appeared to be a response to Kishida's trip, Russia's defense minister said that 2 of its strategic bombers flew over the Sea of Japan. Zelensky said that Kiev had suggested to China that it joined a Ukrainian peace formula to end the war, but had yet to receive an answer. Beijing has proposed a 12-point peace proposal, but Kiev insists on a full Russian troop withdrawal. Japan is due to host a G7 summit in Kishida's hometown of Hiroshima in May. Tokyo has always voiced support for Ukraine and has also joined sanctions against Russia. Zelensky said that he would join the Hiroshima summit online. Kishida says that the summit should demonstrate a strong will to uphold international order and the rule of law in response to the Ukraine war. Remember, Japan has its own territorial dispute with Moscow. Russia's invasion has also deepened concern about what would happen to Japan if China were to invade Taiwan. Encouraged by the United States, Japan in December unveiled its biggest military build-up since World War II. Now, while on one hand, the Chinese President Xi Jinping paid a 3-day visit to Moscow, lamenting stronger ties between China and Russia, on the other hand, the Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida made a surprise visit to Kiev in a bid to promise Japan's unwavering support for Ukraine. Now, this is a clear demonstration of how the war in Ukraine is echoing in Asia, with the Chinese and the Japanese leader visiting the opposing sides of the war in Ukraine. For more on this, we're now being joined by Professor James D.J. Brown from Tokyo. He's an expert in international affairs and professor of political science at the Temple University. Welcome to the broadcast, Professor.
Thank you.
I want to first seek your perspective as to how do you assess these visits by the Chinese leader Xi Jinping to Moscow and at the same time a surprise visit by the Japanese leader to Kiev. What are the optics of these two leaders having these visits at the same time?
Well, what this very much shows is that the two countries have chosen sides in this conflict. From the Japanese point of view, Kishida's visit to Kyiv is a clear demonstration of the Japanese government's very strong support for the Ukrainian government. On the other side, even though the Chinese Communist Party says that they are impartial in this conflict, that's clearly not the case. Really, what the trip demonstrates is Xi Jinping's strong backing for Putin, who he described as a dear friend, and the strong economic ties between those two countries. So what we see in Asia is a clear divide in terms of backing the different sides in this conflict.
Right. Professor, also talking about the joint statement issued by Russia and China. Now, both the countries have issued a statement which clearly says that there are no winners in a nuclear war. But if we go a few weeks back, Putin had mailed a veiled nuclear threat, which could be used in the ongoing war in Ukraine. So is the latest statement a climb down from Putin's earlier stated position, or do you think it has happened because Beijing has now intervened in the ongoing war in Ukraine?
I think since the start of the invasion, we've seen consistently these twin messages, these contradictory messages from Moscow. On the one hand, they continue to say, oh no, we're very much against kind of nuclear conflict. But then only a few days later, you'll hear a very thinly veiled use of language which seeks to intimidate Ukraine with nuclear weapons. So I don't see that as being new. We've had those twin kind of messages for some time now.
Right, absolutely. Also, during the 3-day visit, there was a lot of bonhomie between the Chinese president and his Russian counterpart. They called each other dear friends. But do you think that this partnership between Moscow and Beijing is that of equals at the moment?
No, it's not. It's become, it was unbalanced in China's favor before the start of Russia's invasion. But as Russia has become more isolated, as its economy has become weaker under sanctions, its dependence upon China has become much greater. So we now very much have an unbalanced relationship with Russia increasingly reliant on Beijing.
Right. And again, during the meet, the Chinese president clearly said that Beijing has an impartial stance on the conflict in Ukraine, but it has till now not condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In a scenario like this, how much credibility does China even have as a mediator?
Well, frankly, I don't think it has much credibility at all. They talk about the peace plan, but if you have a look at that peace plan, it's vacuous. There's no real substance to this. And also, if the Russian side were to be serious about wanting peace, they can have peace whenever they want by simply stopping their attacks on Ukraine and withdrawing their forces from Ukrainian territory. So I don't see China as an impartial actor here, not as a credible mediator, but rather as Russia's principal backer.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on this hour and sharing your insights with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you.